I was burnt out in 1967 when I lived at 13 Greenlands Avenue, Sandy Bay. It was the nearest set of houses to the GPO. And on the 7th of February, of course, I left my office. I was sent home by my boss. And by the time I got to the top of Fitzroy Place, I could see that the house was in fact being engulfed in smoke and an attack of sparks. I actually ran from there to Greenlands Avenue, and what I did was watched my bedroom curtains disintegrate because they were nylon. They just dripped and just fell. From then on, what actually happened was we actually went into the house, into the front room, to see and had a little bit of a family conference as to what we were going to do. The front room didn't have a lot of smoke in it, but as we walked out and we didn't take anything, we'd left all the things that were actually in the room. My father decided to go down the hallway to recover some records of the Hutchins School Old Boys. He went into the smoke and fell, and there was a noise and a clutter, and the next thing is he came crawling out on his feet, and I was very relieved when he did, because I was having to make a decision as to whether I was going to go and retrieve him. My mother, of course, had gone out and was outside, and at that point we all went out, but within a very short period of time the house was engulfed completely, and the spark attack was actually occurring on a house directly opposite our place. It was then that I actually jumped from a fence onto a carport roof, across a pathway and onto the roof of the house opposite. And I took a garden hose with me and I pulled the ridge cap of the house opposite up and actually inserted the hose under the ridge cap and put the sparks attack out at the time. And it was just fortuitous that I'd actually been able to see from the sparks when I stepped down the stairs of our house, and I could see what was going on and opposite. However, if in fact the fire hadn't been arrested at that point, it would have actually continued into Regent Street, and further I believe it would have jumped across into perhaps even Grosvenor Street, and then in a wider section of Sandy Bay. But what actually happened was the aide-de-camp from Government House came with a hose from Government House and was able to extinguish the fire, getting number 9 or number 7 Greenlands Avenue, and actually confined the fire to the 3 houses at the end of the street. Of course, the next day, or even that day, one stood up in a suit that had been spot marked by the sparks, and then the next day, of course, one had borrowed clothes and was, I think, really shell-shocked because you just didn't know what had happened to you. However, I actually went to work, funnily enough, and I probably wasn't much good that day. Immediately after the fire, because the house was pulled down, or the bricks were pulled down, but then we had the process of what we were going to do and where we were going to live. And luckily, some friends loaned us their house for the period in which we were actually rebuilding our own. And we actually built on the block that we were burnt out on, and we used the materials that were left over from the fire. So there were 25,000 bricks that we used in the new house. But the big issue was that my father actually had never claimed on War Service Homes loans, and so he was able, as a result of the fire, to make a claim and get a loan on that basis. And we actually ended up 9 months later in a very good new house that I had actually personally designed. It was a family treasure, and for the last 50 years it has actually been in the family, and it's been a very central part of family life. But it was designed for my parents, so that they could, in fact, in their later years, have a wheelchair and wheelchair access to a ground floor house, which they didn't have in the old house. They didn't have that sort of amenity. They really enjoyed living in the new house. They acquired a number of pieces of furniture from various people who were very good to us, and in fact built up over time. They rebuilt the collection of family memorabilia, if you like. Father, in fact, reconstructed the Hutchins School Old Boys life membership records, and he also collected a complete set of the historic magazines, which he later in life gave to Hutchins. But the crucial issue for us was moving from the crisis of the first month after the fire to the re-establishment and knowing where we were going, getting a builder to build the new house, and then the progress on seeing the house actually take shape was very emotional, particularly for my mother, who had lost so many of her precious things that she actually found it a struggle during that recovery phase. But then she actually started weaving the new curtains for the house, and eventually it became an icon in its own right.